Welcome back to our online Bible studies. We are into the subject of stewardship for a few weeks, and this study is entitled Take Time to Be Holy. So we're going to start with reading from Genesis chapter 2 and the first 3 verses. Thus the heavens and the earth and all the host of them were finished. And on the 7th day God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had done. Then God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. So to begin to understand the impact and importance of taking time to be holy, we need to go back to the beginning. We need to go back to Genesis, right back at creation, and see where God is completing the work of his hands, bringing about all things. And then on the 7th day, he calls it a holy day, a Sabbath day. And he sanctified it. He made it holy by declaring it a day of completion. And as I mentioned before, that's not an indicator for us to just choose to be holy on any one given day and to get away with anything on all the other days. But it's a call to a time of focus, a time of reflection, a time of resting. It's time with God where nothing else can interfere. In your heart, things may happen that call your attention to something, of course, but you are focused. You are aware that this time is benefiting you because you are spending time with God. So once again, we come to the word that we've seen before, sanctity, or to sanctify. And it means to make something holy, to set it apart. And this was the Sabbath day. Now, the Sabbath day came along long before Christianity and Judaism. It's part of creation. It entered the law in Moses' time, but it was created by God. And it was part of the creative work of God that man should cease from his labor, which meant right from the beginning, we were meant to work. We were to loll about in the Garden of Eden, munching fruit and whatever. We were to look after the place. That was the intent of God. So there would be labor, but it wouldn't be crushing labor. But you would need to rest, time to spend time with the Creator. So man would cease from his labor and give one day focus with his relationship to the Almighty. And in that, man would be restored. If we go to Exodus chapter 20 and verse 8, we read these words, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." By that time, it was easy to forget certain things. Sin had entered, man had gone off into sin, and now there needs to be a call to remembrance. And we still need that call to remember. Remember to take time with God. So taking time to be holy is simply to set aside time where we are totally focused on him. And that time is regenerative and restorative. Now, as Gentile Christians, the question is, are we bound by that law? Once it was in the law, are we bound by it? Is it part of the creative work of God? Yes. Are we bound by it? That's not really the question. The question is not, are we bound by it, but do we want it? Do we recognize the benefit of it? And why would we turn away from it? If it's regenerative and restorative and it gives us time with God, why wouldn't we take time to practice that and bring it into our weekly routines? Now, not that you give God just one day a week, but you give one day of that to a complete focus on God. And after all, in modern times, we have so much of our time stolen away from us. So I think the first step here is not to try and find a way to avoid it. You wouldn't want to do that. If our mindset is such that we're looking how we can minimize that, or do the bare minimal, then we've got a poor relationship with God, haven't we? If we have an arsenal of excuses and reasons why we have to opt out of taking time with God, I think we need to look at our commitment level and reevaluate that. However, most of us, I don't think, live that way. We long to please God, and we long to do his will, and we long to know his presence. Now, Jesus observed the Sabbath, but he had some scathing words to the religious leaders of the day. They had reduced the Sabbath to a burden. It weighed heavy on people, and it was no longer a joyful time. It was a time of stark, severe religious pressure. Listen in Mark 2 what Jesus has to say in these moments. Verses 23 to 28. Now it happened that he went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. And as they went, his disciples began to pluck the heads of corn. And the Pharisees said to him, "Look, why do they do that which is not lawful on the Sabbath?" But he said to them, "Have you never read that what David did when he was in need and hungry? He and those who were with him, when they went into the house of God on the days of Abiathar the high priest, ate the showbread, which is not lawful to eat except for the priests. And he also gave some to those who were with him. And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Therefore the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." Jesus is in charge. And he had no problem with his disciples taking something to eat. But the Pharisees had made such a burden of the Sabbath that it lost all its true impact. Taking time to be holy is never about showcasing our righteousness. It's not about ticking the holy box once a week. But as Jesus said, the Sabbath was made for man, not man to serve the Sabbath. Now, with one's relationship intact, having time away from the rat race of life or the demanding workloads that we have to earn a crust, and we all know about that, is it truly restorative? Is what we do, and that's the question. I'm not trying to be more holy than you. I'm not trying to be more holy than them. We're not trying to be more holy than our nearest and dearest. We're trying to know God and be in his presence and find a restoration. Absolutely, the world will take something out of your soul, but God wants to refill you. The New Testament believers, they picked Sunday as the day of gathering and worship. Now they did that. Most of them were early Christians, were Jews, so they would do the Sabbath requirements on the Saturday. Sunday was the first working day of the week, so they would normally meet in the evening where they would look at the Word of God and they would pray and so forth. And so ultimately in time, Sunday became the day of rest. Now, reading through the New Testament, you'll see that Sunday, as I mentioned, was the first working day. So when the Gentiles became more dominant in the church, it became what we would call the holy day, the Sabbath day. So Sunday then became the day that we are now familiar with as the day we gather together and worship together and focus on the things God has done and the greatness of his provisions for us. So today we have Sunday as our elected day and often celebrate worship then, communion, breaking of bread as it is sometimes known, spiritual rest, renewal, worship, and so forth. And we enjoy that. And as Jesus saw no fault with his disciples plucking corn to eat on the Sabbath, I don't think if you're driving your car to church, when we can get back to that, and you've got to pull in for some petrol, and you've got to buy that. I remember back in the day, you don't do anything of that. You don't spend any money on a Sunday. Well, that was very much leaning back towards the Pharisees, wasn't it? Don't do this, don't do that. Jesus said, look, if it's necessary, do it, but keep your focus. The Sabbath is to help you. And therefore, keep it like that. Keep it sanctified. Keep it precious. Keep the day precious. You may do a number of things, but always be focused on, this is God's day, and I appreciate it. So we can be a little more relaxed about it, but not in the sense of it easy come, easy go. Why don't we read Hebrews 10 for a moment in verse 19 to 25. Therefore, brethren, having boldness to enter the holies by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way which he consecrated for us, through the veil, that is his flesh, and having a high priest over the house of God, let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience, and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. I just want to pause there. He who promised is faithful. Always remember that God is faithful, and he will bring restorative, needy empowerment to you if you take time to draw near to him. It goes on to say, and let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as is the manner of some. Some people were forsaking that, but exhorting one another, and so much more as the day approaches. Now, the writer of the Hebrews draws our attention to the values and the principles of collective worship, of mutual considerations, and of the powerful implications of exhortation of one another, building one another up. Now, how do you do that? Now, in our circumstances today, in our present situation, we have all missed out on that one thing, contact with other believers. And we've missed it for so long. But the Church of Christ is not inexperienced in this. Over the centuries, the church in many lands needed to go underground. Famously in China, of course, under communist rule, when the church emerged, it had grown exponentially into the millions. The church will always survive. It's God's blessed bride of Christ. It is wonderful to be part of the church. But you have to have, each one of us has to have that intimate, personal, hungry relationship with God. So today, as we continue in limited communion, so to speak, we need to be inventive with the Sabbath. We need to be inventive with time away with God. If it was all about getting into the building of what we call church and meeting with the church, the people, and we can't do that as we used to do, it will happen again. I'm certain of that. But until then, how do we do that? We relate wherever and however we can. We're not putting it on the shelf and saying, well, I'll get back to that one day when it comes around. We be creative now. And I think it's wonderful that our church and many, many other churches throughout the land, and I'm sure throughout the world, have suddenly risen to the challenge of connection. And I think it's wonderful that we have the technology. When this jolly virus came along, we had the technology to meet it head on. So let's celebrate that. But we're looking forward to being together when it's correct and right to do so. So if you tune in on Sundays, and some of you tuning in here on Tuesdays, any other time where you're breaking bread or simple interactions, keep the faith. Keep the faith. Hold fast to what is good and encourage one another as you do. And in that, you take time to be holy. Time to be sanctified, set apart. So taking time to be holy doesn't mean take time to just say, oh, right now I'm going to be holy. I'm not holy much other times, but right now I am. Doesn't mean that at all. And I'm sure you don't see it like that. What it means is take time to be considerate, focused, and hungry for God. And in so doing, considering one another. Let me read you words from a few words from a hymn I came across. I wasn't familiar with it, but I did come across it. Maybe it'll resonate something with you as we consider our subject tonight. It says, take time to be holy, speak often with your Lord, abide in him always and feed on his word. Make friends of God's children and help those who are weak, forgetting in nothing his blessings to seek. With that, I found that was written by a man called John Longhurst. I don't know the author of that, but those words just caught my attention. The all-inclusiveness of that. Speaking with God, fellowshipping with other people, and helping them who are seekers to become people who find. And with that in mind, our taking time to be holy, as I titled the subject, must surely involve our relationship with God and one another. How can it ever be right to bow in worship to the Creator and not respect his creation? How is that ever correct? God himself spoke of his creation as good, and of mankind, as I mentioned earlier, very good. So taking time to be holy requires time with God and consideration of our fellow man. And I want you to think about that for a moment. How inappropriate it is. And I'm not saying that I know anyone that does this, but just to put it out there for a moment, for all our consideration, how inappropriate to say we worship God, we love the Lord, but we can't be kind to one another. The thing doesn't gel right. The kindest person who went out of his way to do what no one else would bother to do, of course, was Jesus. And he got vilified for speaking to a woman, going to a certain place, meeting with certain people who were considered to be unworthy. I love the fact when I read the New Testament that I find it says, and Jesus was with the publicans and sinners. He was down with the down and outs. He was down in the dirt with a woman who was cast before him, found in adultery. He was down there talking to her. He never worried about what the Pharisees and the Sadducees were saying. He knew the heart of people, and he reached them. He touched the lepers, and he never got anywhere near leprosy. It didn't touch him. He hugged the unlovely. He embraced the outcast. So how could it possibly be right for us to worship the Creator and not love the creation? Our fellowship with other believers and our compassionate interactions with those who are not part of the church is all important. I know for sure I'm preaching to the converted here, but we were never, ever to lock ourselves in, away from the world. Don't touch me, world, I'm holy. That was never the case, and that's not the point I'm making here about taking time to be holy. Don't talk to me, I'm too holy. Don't touch me, I'm too holy. That's not what holiness is about. Holiness is about knowing God and his compassionate heart and reaching out to his creation. You want to take time to be holy? Help someone in need. Be compassionate to someone in pain. Offer hope to someone in despair. Be a true representative of Jesus to those who are blind to his grace and his mercy. Take time to be holy. Find the needy, show them the heart of God. Take time to be holy. Find someone who has nothing and share what you have. Take time to be holy and offer the hand of fellowship to someone who has been rejected by others. And you will show Jesus to the world, and in so doing, you will glorify him. So we've looked at our subject tonight. Take time to be holy. And I know the subject title might have suggested, there's a place and a time for us to suddenly become very ultra-religious. And it couldn't be further from the truth. Taking time to be holy is to be with God, who shows you his heart And then you take that heart to a world that needs to know that God is love. So bless you, and have a great week, and do what you're doing, because you're doing great. Do whatever you can, and don't beat yourself up if you don't get the opportunities. God will send those, but when he does, use them well, and you will honor the King. God bless you, and we'll see you again next week.